All right, hey, so we're gonna look real quick at different types of muscle contractions when we look at how the muscle functions, how it acts. Basically, at the very base level, we have muscle fibers. Now, muscle fibers are just single cells. They're nice and long, they contract. Muscle fascicles are groups of muscle fibers, and then groups of muscle fascicles are then actual muscles that we see attached to tendon and then to bone that create motion. And they do create motion, they also resist motion. So when we break down different types of muscle contractions, we're gonna start with eccentric and then how to train that. So think of your muscle like a rubber band or a stretchy band. So if I apply force on one end, that stretch of the muscle contracts to resist that stretching out, okay? So basically, at the base level in that muscle cell, you have actin and myosin, and so they're basically trying to resist getting longer. And the way it does that, and being able to kind of act as a braking force in the muscle. Now, the nice thing about this is that muscle fibers, when they act eccentrically, they can actually handle more force than they can concentrically, right? So if this, resisting this force is eccentric, concentric is then bringing that back and tugging back to create motion. So how do we then train it, right? And there's a couple different ways. Now, when we look at training eccentrically, we have really two different ways. We have normal eccentrics, which is our tempo movement. So if I were to take this kettlebell here and I do a goblet squat and I keep my chest up and I can lower it into this tempo, right? A down for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then standing up. What I'm doing is, especially for my quads, I'm loading up and I'm eccentrically loading my quads to resist knee flexion, to resist hip extension. So being able to get in that position and lower, I can eccentrically load those muscle fibers. If I were to do the same thing, say with a deadlift, right? I can sit there and load 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and getting into those motions, I can eccentrically load the hamstrings. Being able to understand that once I start eccentrically loading tissues, I'm training its ability to resist forces. So that's a slow eccentric or just a normal eccentric when we look at training. The other way that we can think of this eccentric motion is just short drops. So, if you think about stepping off of a step and catching yourself, we consider a fast eccentric. So it's basically, slow eccentrics is going to train your ability to slow things down. Fast eccentrics is going to slow it down faster. It's almost like slamming on the brakes for your body. Now, let's just say in an athletic sense, we see these things called snap downs or drops. We're basically dropping into this position and catching and holding as quick as possible. Fast eccentric, we're slowing the body down so it doesn't hit the ground super hard. We can then level those up. You can step off a box, a step, a stool. You can then even overload it, dropping onto a single leg, a fast eccentric. So when we're looking at those muscle contractions, what that ends up applying to long term, if we take that eccentric muscle contraction, we then can apply it to our sporting motions because we have our stretch shortening cycle, which would include all of our different contractions. Being able to understand that eccentric contraction is very important to slowing down, creating potential energy, and then being able to keep joints safe and healthy because it's that braking force. Just like a car has brakes to prevent it from wrecking and crashing into another car in front of it, your body has brakes for each joint. So being able to understand that's one of the different types of muscle contractions. We'll dive into some of the other ones in concurrent videos just so you can understand how each one of those works and then why each one of them exists in order to then improve your health and improve your performance.